Okay, so let's get right into it. There's a new U.S. bill on the table, and it's got the backing of Donald Trump. Now, this isn't just another piece of legislation. It's something that could completely shake up global trade as we know it. We're talking about a potential 500% tariff aimed at key partners like India, basically turning economic policy into a powerful weapon. So let's start with that headline number, because it's pretty shocking. A 500% tariff on India? It sounds almost unbelievable, right? It's the kind of number that sends a ripple of concern through the entire global economy. So what on earth does it actually mean? And how serious is this threat? Just take a moment and let that number sink in. 500%. We're used to hearing about tariffs, maybe 5%, 10%, even 50% in a really heated trade dispute. But this is on a totally different planet. This isn't just a tax to make things a little more expensive. It's a full-stop trade blockade. To put this in really simple terms, think about it like this. If a company in the US buys something from India for $100, this tariff would slap an extra $500 on top. All of a sudden, that item costs $600 before you even think about shipping or anything else. There's just no way Indian goods could compete. So, this isn't about raising money for the US government, it's a punitive measure, a tool designed to be a really powerful geopolitical weapon. So where is this incredibly powerful economic weapon even coming from? Well, it's all buried inside a piece of legislation called the Russia's Sanctions Bill, and it's designed to put the absolute maximum amount of pressure on Russia's economy. Now, to really get what's going on here, you have to understand this key concept: secondary sanctions. It sounds a little technical, but the idea is actually pretty simple. This isn't about punishing Russia directly. That's already happening. This is about punishing other countries for doing business with Russia. And this right here perfectly illustrates the bill's two-pronged attack. The main goal, the primary objective, is to hurt Russia's war economy so badly that they're forced to the negotiating table over the conflict in Ukraine. But that secondary objective is just as important. It's designed to make it economically impossible for any other country to help Russia out by buying its oil. It basically forces nations to make a choice. You can trade with Russia, or you can trade with the United States, but you can't do both. Okay, so this isn't just some vague threat hanging over the entire world. The bill is very specific. It actually calls out some major global players by name. Yep, the legislation explicitly names India, China, and Brazil. And that is no accident. These are three of the biggest, most important economies in the global south. From Washington's perspective, their continued trade with Russia is actively undermining the Western sanctions already in place. And this table just lays out the whole conflict perfectly. You can really see the two sides of the coin. From the US point of view, India is essentially funding Russia's war by buying up all its discounted oil. But from India's perspective, they're simply making a sovereign economic choice to keep the lights on for 1.4 billion people. You see that same tension playing out with China and Brazil, with each country trying to walk this tightrope between their own national interests and the immense pressure coming from the US. So as you can probably imagine, this whole approach, using your own domestic laws to try and dictate the foreign policy of other countries, it's causing a pretty significant global controversy. This quote right here, which reflects India's official stance, really gets to the absolute heart of the disagreement. The argument is straightforward. Look, we follow internationally agreed upon sanctions from the United Nations. Why should we be forced to follow the domestic laws of just one country? And this is exactly why the bill is so contentious. First, it's seen as a direct challenge to the idea of national sovereignty. Second, it kind of undermines global institutions like the UN Security Council by just going around them. It essentially tries to replace international law with US domestic law. And of course, the big one, it creates a massive risk of a tit-for-tat trade war, where countries like India and China could just start slapping retaliatory tariffs back on the US, leading to a much more fragmented and chaotic global economy. Okay, so that's the threat hanging in the air. But what's the real-world impact? What's happening on the ground? Faced with all this intense pressure, how is India actually reacting right now? Well, it seems the threat alone is having a pretty powerful effect. Even before this bill has any chance of becoming law, India has already started to quietly, but very significantly, scale back its purchases of Russian oil. It's a clear signal that the pressure from Washington is being taken very, very seriously. And you don't have to take my word for it. The numbers tell the whole story. At its peak, India was bringing in about 2 million barrels of Russian crude every single day. By December, that number had already dropped to 1.2 million barrels. That's a nearly 40% drop. It's a clear, measurable response to the pressure coming from Washington. But this is the real clincher. Reliance Industries, which is the single biggest private buyer of Russian oil in all of India, publicly announced it would take zero. That's right, zero deliveries in January. Now, when the biggest player on the field makes a move that decisive, it sends a powerful message to everyone else that the risk of U.S. sanctions is just too high to ignore. So what happens next? Well, it's really important to remember, this bill isn't law yet. It still has to make its way through both houses of the U.S. Congress and then get signed by the president. And even if it does become law, it doesn't mean a 500% tariff gets automatically triggered. What it would do is give the president a massive new tool, this incredible discretionary power to apply these tariffs selectively whenever they want to put diplomatic pressure on another country. And this whole situation really forces us to step back and ask a much bigger question. As the world's major powers increasingly use things like tariffs, sanctions, and economic pressure as their go-to tools, are we stepping into a new era where trade itself becomes the primary battlefield? It really makes you wonder, is economic coercion going to become the defining weapon of 21st century diplomacy?